I never imagined my life would split so cleanly into before and after. But looking back now, the signs were there, quiet and deliberate. I was married into comfort, not passion. My husband was kind in a practiced way, attentive when it was convenient, distant when it mattered most. We lived together like partners managing a routine, not lovers sharing a pulse. I told myself that stability was enough, that wanting more was childish. That lie kept me calm for a long time. Then there was her. She entered my life as someone I was supposed to trust without question. She smiled easily, spoke softly, and listened in a way that made people feel seen. When she was around, conversations flowed better. Laughter lingered longer. I didn't feel threatened at first. I felt relieved. It was nice having someone else fill the silence my husband and I had stopped noticing. What I didn't understand then was that silence had been an invitation. Small things began to shift. Glances lasted a second too long. Messages were deleted by accident. Plans were made without including me, then explained away with excuses that sounded rehearsed. I noticed how they shared private jokes I wasn't part of, how their energy changed when I entered the room. I asked myself if I was imagining it, if insecurity was making me paranoid. I chose denial because it was easier than confrontation. One evening, a moment cracked that illusion. Nothing dramatic, no raised voices or confessions. Just a look they exchanged when they thought I wasn't watching. It wasn't guilt I saw. It was certainty. That was the night I understood this wasn't impulsive or accidental. Whatever was happening had intention behind it. They weren't stumbling into betrayal. They were walking toward it together. I felt foolish for not seeing it sooner. But more than that, I felt strangely calm. There was pain, yes, sharp and heavy, but also clarity. For the first time in years, I stopped blaming myself for the emptiness in my marriage. I realized I hadn't failed to keep his attention. He had already chosen to give it elsewhere. And she hadn't taken anything that was truly mine. What they were planning only exposed what was already broken. I watched more carefully after that. I listened without reacting. I learned how deep it went, how long they had been testing boundaries, convincing themselves it was harmless. They thought they were clever. They thought I was unaware. What they didn't know was that with every secret shared between them, something inside me was waking up. I began to imagine a life beyond the one I was clinging to. Not revenge, not drama, just freedom. The idea scared me, but it also gave me strength. I stopped trying to fix what didn't want to be fixed. I stopped begging for attention that was already promised elsewhere. Instead, I observed, waited, and prepared myself emotionally for the truth I knew would surface. When everything finally came out, it wouldn't be a shock to me. It would be confirmation. And as strange as it sounds, part of me was grateful. Grateful that they planned it so carefully, because their certainty forced me to confront my own. That night, as I lay awake beside a man who no longer felt like mine, I realized this betrayal might not destroy me. It might be the reason I finally choose myself. I kept telling myself I could step back whenever I wanted, but the truth was I didn't want to. Not anymore. Every time he reached out, something inside me responded before my mind had a chance to raise any warnings. What began as quick, simple check-ins slowly turned into long, unhurried conversations that stretched into the late hours, those hours when everything is quieter, and honesty becomes easier to slip into. I noticed how I started waiting for those conversations, how the sound of his notification pulled me out of moods I didn't even know I was in. He had a way of talking that made me forget about everything happening around me. He didn't rush, didn't judge, didn't interrupt. I told him things I hadn't admitted to myself, let alone said out loud. He listened closely, responding in a way that made me feel like every word mattered. And maybe that was the moment I should have been more careful, because once someone becomes your commonplace, distance becomes harder to create. The shift wasn't sudden, but it was unmistakable. One night, after he told me he had been struggling again, he admitted something quietly, as if the words weighed too much. He said he didn't want to depend on me but didn't know how to stop. I stared at the message longer than I should have, feeling a pull I didn't want to acknowledge. I typed and deleted my reply 3 times before finally telling him he wasn't a burden. I told him he mattered. I told him he deserved someone in his corner. I never expected that my words would bring silence on his side. Deep, heavy silence that lasted long enough for doubt to creep in. When he finally responded, his message was short but revealing. He thanked me, but not casually the way people thank each other daily. It was the kind of thank you layered with unspoken emotion, the kind that admits something real without saying it. I felt my chest tighten because I knew that moment had crossed an invisible line. Still innocent, still explainable, yet undeniably charged. After that, things weren't the same. Our conversations carried an undertone neither of us named. His voice changed when we talked. Softer, warmer, careful in a way that felt personal. He started picking up on my moods before I said a word, asking if I had eaten, if I was resting, if something had upset me that day. Those small questions shouldn't have mattered, but they did. They mattered too much that I realized how deep I had slipped when he told me he trusted me more than anyone else. The confession wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, almost accidental, but it hit me harder than it should have. I should have pulled back then. I should have created space. Instead, I leaned in. One evening, while telling him about something that had frustrated me, I paused mid-sentence. He noticed instantly. He said my name differently, gentle, steady, grounding. Just hearing it made me feel understood in a way I hadn't felt in years. I didn't say anything after that, but in the silence between us, I felt the truth settle. This wasn't just help anymore. It wasn't just comfort. And resisting, really resisting, was becoming something I wasn't sure I could do much longer. After he left, I told myself distance would fix everything. I avoided his messages at first, then read them without replying, then finally answered with short, careful words. We both pretended we were just checking in, just making sure things weren't awkward. But underneath that politeness was the memory of what we'd shared. And it refused to fade. It followed me through my days, through conversations with my husband, through the quiet moments when I was alone with my thoughts. My husband noticed something was off. He asked if I was tired, if something was bothering me. I said no, smiling when I needed to, playing my role well enough that he believed me. That made the guilt worse. Lying to him felt heavier than the moment itself. Every time he touched my hand or spoke about the future, I felt like I was standing on unstable ground, afraid one wrong move would expose everything. The friend came over again a week later. It wasn't planned, at least not officially. My husband invited him for dinner like nothing had changed. Watching them together was unbearable. They laughed easily, shared memories, trusted each other completely. I felt like an outsider in my own home, carrying a secret that poisoned every word. When our eyes met across the room, it was brief, controlled, but charged. We both knew we were pretending for the same reason. Later, when my husband stepped out to take a call, the silence between us returned. This time it wasn't awkward. It was heavy, familiar. He didn't apologize, and neither did I. Apologies would have meant admitting regret, and neither of us was ready to do that. Instead, he asked how I'd been sleeping. I told him the truth. Not well. That was enough. The boundary we tried to rebuild cracked quietly. No dramatic moment, no sudden decision. Just a shared understanding that what we were feeling hadn't gone away. If anything, it had grown stronger in the absence. We talked more after that, always carefully, always justifying it as harmless. We never said we were doing something wrong. We just avoided saying it wasn't. What scared me most was how normal it began to feel. Sneaking glances, stolen conversations, the way my heart reacted to his presence. I found myself anticipating his messages, replaying his words in my head. It wasn't about desire alone anymore. It was emotional, intimate in a way that reached deeper than anything physical could. That realization terrified me, because I knew emotional betrayal was harder to excuse. One evening, he admitted something that shook me. He said watching me that day had changed how he saw everything. That restraint had been harder than he expected, and walking away had felt like leaving something unfinished. Hearing that stirred the same feeling in me. I thought time would dull it. Instead, it sharpened it. That I told him we couldn't keep doing this. I meant it when I said it. I listed all the reasons: my marriage, his friendship, the damage we'd cause. He listened quietly, not arguing, not interrupting. When I finished, he said he understood. Then he asked a single question that unraveled everything again. He asked if I was happy. That I couldn't answer. That silence was louder than any confession. It exposed a truth I'd been avoiding. This wasn't just about him. It was about what was missing in my life, and how desperately I wanted to feel wanted again. I wasn't just betraying my husband, I was confronting the version of myself I'd become. When we parted that night, nothing physical happened, but something else did. I accepted that this wasn't a momentary lapse. It was a crossroads. Every step forward from here would be a choice, not an accident. And deep down, I knew that choosing to continue, even emotionally, meant I was already crossing a line I could never uncross. The breaking point didn't come with shouting or discovery. It arrived quietly, the way most irreversible things do. One morning, I woke up before my husband and watched him sleep, really watched him. His face was relaxed, trusting, unaware of the storm I'd been carrying inside our home. In that moment, the weight of my choices settled fully on me. This wasn't just about what I felt or what I was missing. It was about what I was risking, and who would pay the price if I kept pretending I could balance both worlds. Later that day, his friend messaged me again. Nothing dramatic, nothing inappropriate on the surface. Just a simple check-in. I stared at my phone for a long time before responding. For the first time, the excitement I used to feel was overshadowed by exhaustion. I was tired of hiding, tired of splitting myself in two, tired of living in a constant state of almost. I realized then that the situation had already taken more from me than it had given. When we spoke next, I didn't soften my words. I told him we had to stop completely. No more messages, no more private conversations, no more moments that felt harmless but weren't. I expected resistance, maybe even anger. Instead, he was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, there was sadness in his voice, but also relief. He admitted he'd been waiting for me to say it, afraid that if I didn't, neither of us would have the strength to walk away. That honesty hurt more than denial ever could. The distance afterward was immediate and noticeable. He kept his word. So did I. When he came around, it was only when my husband was there. And even then, we kept our interactions minimal, polite, almost formal. Anyone watching would have thought nothing had ever happened. That was the hardest part. Knowing how easily secrets can disappear on the surface while still leaving scars underneath, why marriage didn't magically improve. That was another hard truth I had to face. Ending the emotional betrayal didn't fix the loneliness that started it. But it did force me to confront it honestly. I started speaking up more, asking for what I needed instead of quietly resenting what I wasn't getting. Some conversations with my husband were uncomfortable. Some ended without resolution, but at least they were real. There were nights when I replayed everything in my head, wondering how close I'd come to destroying my life over a moment of feeling seen. I questioned whether stopping made me strong or just scared. The answer, I think, was both. Strength and fear often look the same when you're standing on the edge of something dangerous. As time passed, the intensity faded, replaced by something quieter. Regret mixed with clarity. I learned that betrayal doesn't always look the way people imagine. Sometimes it's not reckless or dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle, built from unmet needs and unspoken feelings. That doesn't make it harmless. If anything, it makes it more dangerous that I never told my husband the truth. That choice still weighs on me. I don't know if silence was mercy or cowardice. What I do know is that the experience changed how I see myself. I understand now how easy it is to justify crossing lines when you're emotionally starved, and how important it is to recognize that hunger before it leads you somewhere you can't come back from. Nothing physical ever happened, but something real did. A trust was tested, a boundary was broken, and a lesson was learned the hard way. I live with that knowledge every day. And if there's one thing I'm certain of now, it's this. The most dangerous betrayals aren't the ones everyone sees. They're the ones that almost happen and change you forever anyway.